Hello and welcome to the live stream of the Guest EdTech Virtual Summit Dubai. We'd like to thank everyone for listening. A few bits of information about the live session before we get underway. For any attendees who haven't yet attended any of the previous ones, there's a chat panel located on the right-hand side of the GRIP platform. Please feel free to ask us any questions and our moderator will get back to you and pass these along to the panelists. Please also note that because they are moderated, there may be a slight delay in your question or an answer showing. We'll do our very best to get through them all, but if we don't manage to, don't worry, as they'll all be saved in the system and we'll get back to you after the event. If you want to watch the session all over again, we'll be uploading the recording here shortly and after the event as well on our Guest Education YouTube channel. We're on social media during the event, so if you want to connect there, follow us at Guest Education on Twitter and use the hashtag #GuestEdTech. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our brilliant panel. Our chair and moderator, Gilda Scarfe, founder and CEO of Positive Ed, Hind AlMualla, Chief of Creativity, Happiness and Innovation at the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, the KHDA, Nargish Khambatta, Principal and CEO of GEMS Modern Academy and Vice President Education at GEMS, and Tracy Moxley, Director of Education at Aldar Education, who has recently opened a new secondary school during the pandemic, which I think is absolutely amazing. We hope that you enjoyed this live panel discussion and that you're as excited as I am to hear what our valuable speakers have to say. I'll now hand it over to you, Gilda.
Thank you. Thank you, Danny. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today to learn about the role of well-being, resilience, and mental toughness in education and how does the new way forward looks like. And I'm really delighted to moderate this session and having a wonderful panel with great experience. And it goes without saying that we live in a very dynamic and turbulent and unpredictable world. Few countries have escaped unscathed from the COVID-19, and most psychologists and researchers predict that students around the globe will face ongoing uncertainties and challenges for years to come. So now more than ever, we need to look at investing and supporting young people to thrive and succeed. But what is the new way forward? So we know that the evidence shows that implementing well-being or mental health programs in schools can lead to significant improvement in children's mental health and social and emotional skills, but also is a good correlation between the well-being and academic achievement. So I'm going to start with one question for you all. What does well-being mean to you and flourishing? Well, I don't want to diminish the deficiencies, which we all face, and the uncertainties, but what does the flourishing mean to you and how is it reflected in your school and your organization? So if I may invite first Nargish.
Thank you, Gilda. When I was first introduced to the concept of flourishing, we all know it as a term in English, but when I was exposed to Martin Seligman's research and his work on flourishing, I was absolutely blown away because I think, for every school, the purpose of education really is to get children to flourish. And how does one enable that? I think there are various models floating out there, but I think as an educator for me, it's really understanding our children well enough and knowing our children well enough to enable them to flourish. Because if we don't build those relationships with our children, and if we don't really put systems in place to help them flourish, then I think we're doing them a disservice, a complete disservice. And whether it is, the PERMA model which he advocates so strongly, and from that, I think the core of that really is relationship building, because everything revolves then around the relationships that you build. And I think as a school, even at GEMS, we really spend a lot of time building those relationships. And a host of series that we do it. But if I can just sum up, the vision statement that we have, and that is inspiring children to be positive change makers. And so it was a labor of love. We spent 8 months just defining the vision, because that's what then drives everything. And inspiring children to be positive change makers takes all of those elements, whether it's meaning, accomplishment, relationships, engagement, positive emotions, all of that just gets drawn in so beautifully. So I think as a school, that's how we go about it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Nargish. And I'm going to move to Tracy. And the reason I want to know, because obviously Dubai is so rich, and the United Arab Emirates is so rich culturally. You've got so many nationalities, and obviously in a school context as well. How, listening to Nargish, how does your experience in terms of flourishing in your school and well-being, does it compare?
I think now that the well-being frameworks that Nargish has referred to have really come into their own in this pandemic. And I think previously, you know, it was a nice to have if you were a school that was looking at the whole child and focusing on happiness and well-being, as well as the academic curriculum. Great. I think now what we've seen though is that positive education and psychology have really come to the fore. And so for us, you know, flourishing is that positivity, that happiness, that growth mindset, doing well and feeling good. And it does come down to relationships. And certainly I think even at distance, we see teachers checking in with children, making sure they're okay, spending a few minutes just saying, hey, how are you doing? And can I do anything? And is anything troubling you? And also, I think having other older students doing that, so older students acting as peer mentors, because obviously students find it so much easier to talk to one another, and those guys actually taking leadership roles in our schools. And so for us, I think putting together a well-being strategy is how we've approached it and made it a much more formal part of what we do in our schools now every day, and having lots of campaigns and looking at ways of working with our students that are slightly different to how we would have done it before, certainly, and in person. So I think for us, we have tried to look at diversity as incredibly positive and actually focus on how we can use external agencies as well to support our students, and a lot of those have happened certainly in Abu Dhabi. So we've actually made a number of partnerships to increase our students' well-being and their self-esteem while we're going through this pandemic.
That's wonderful, Tracy. And I think it is very important to realize that as a school, it's really difficult. I mean, in terms of bringing well-being, you do need to get some expertise, and most important, you need to bring some evidence-based. You need to know what works and what doesn't work, and to trial things. So, Hind, I'm coming to you because KHDA obviously is doing an amazing job in not only promoting well-being, but really supporting the school the best way they can in this journey, which is not easy. We all know it's not easy. And I have seen it firsthand how KHDA actually looks like well-being as an organization. But can you tell me from your perspective, from inside the organization? So I know from outside how it looks like, but from inside the organization, how do you think the well-being it's kind of disseminated around for the schools to know that they have your support?
Yes, thank you very much, Gilda. And within that question, I think it's going back. I'll stop at the word flourish, and then I'll just go to the simple meaning of flourish. Not nothing scientific. It's and it's when I looked it up, it has something about development and growing, and I think that's very crucial. Where to grow, you need challenges. I mean, that's for sure, because you can grow without any challenges. Your growth will be hindered and you will be quite weak. But if you grow with all of these challenges, then definitely you will be much stronger. Now, and that's where the importance of well-being lies, because focusing on well-beings, not in good days, probably we are all the same, but when things get tough, your reserve of well-being, all of that work that you've been focusing on, whether explicitly, whether it's built in within the DNA of the school or organization, will serve you and will help you to move forward, either as an individual or as an organization.
That's brilliant. I think we all agree that education needs to change. I mean, I don't really like to use the word change. I think it's evolving. It has to evolve to cope with the different landscape which we are facing at the moment. And that takes me to the second question about how do we manage to change the education system to balance the focus between academic achievement and competencies and development of the young people? Because we all know that it's a huge amount of research stating that if you have a child in your school who's confident, who is happy, who is well self-regulating, understand how to reframe negative emotion into positive emotion. And I hear a lot talk about positivity, and it really upsets me because it's misconstrued in the way how it's seen. But it's about optimism, it's about hope, it's about empowering young people to be accountable. But as as schools, and we all have restrictions because that's how the world works. But what can we do to create that balance? Because obviously context, knowledge, it's incredibly important. And I don't want to diminish that. And I'm taking back to, Nargish, to what you said about positive education. And Tracy, all of you mentioned positive education, that balance between social and emotional competencies or well-being and academic achievement. So we know it works, but you don't have a lot of time in your school day. How do you manage to balance that? What do we need to do? What external factors or policymaker, what can we do to balance that? And Tracy, I'm going to you because you just opened a new school, and this is amazing. In these times, it's not an easy task, especially with all the uncertainties and the emotion which are running high from students to teachers to all the stuff you have. What is your opinion about that? How do you balance it?
From my perspective, I think that we've formalized the offer of well-being, if you like. So what we've tried to do is make that kind of mental well-being and counselling a norm rather than something which is unusual. So actually encouraging students to seek counselling. And I have to say, our counsellors in the schools have certainly had their work cut out for them. They've managed to support all of our students incredibly well, and also ensure that we've slightly changed that model. So where we have had counselling sessions, we've put in a silent observer to ensure safeguarding. And I think really being mindful of that has definitely made the difference, certainly for students. I would actually say a focus on teacher well-being at this point is worth a mention as well, because we want healthy, happy teachers in front of our students. And I think we have to ensure that there are strategies there for our staff as well. And certainly, I think, again, working with external partners, we've tried to do that to ensure that they have access as well to the expertise that they require.
I'm absolutely delighted to hear that. And partly as a researcher, for me, it's very important, because when I started researching in well-being, I always started with the students, because that was my drive and my passion. I wanted the students to feel empowered, that they can conquer the world. And then I realized that I needed to flip. Because if a teacher is not well, if a teacher doesn't feel confident, if a teacher doesn't feel supported, and you can't succeed. You can't expect that. It's about role modeling, isn't it? But ultimately, one of the things I'm asking you, Nargish, now, I know your school, and I know the great achievements you do and the support you put in. Again, there are loads of elements of putting support in school in terms of training or bringing external people to empower. And it is still related to the question which I put about the balance, but my worry is a little bit that we doing a little bit of training and we're expecting the teachers to carry all that weight throughout, which is really very difficult, because as a psychologist, it's not easy, and I'm continuously learning and evolving. Now, as a teacher, if he stays in a half a day training session, it's not enough. So how do you create that continuity to create that balance in a school?
So A couple of things, actually. I'm going to start with the conversation I had with, I'm sure many of us on the panel know her, Sonia bin Jafar, the ex-director of EduWell. And I was having a conversation with her the other day, and she said something that made my eyebrows disappear into my, hairline. And she said she's got a 5-year-old and who goes to school, and she says the teacher called her in for a discussion, and she said, I don't want to know what my child is doing in math and English and all the rest of it. Tell me, how are you developing her executive functions?
Oh.
And how are you developing empathy now? How are you developing self-regulation? How are you teaching her to be a good human being? For me, that's more important than the math and science will take care of itself. And she said at the same time, I'm introducing her to concepts like, talking to her about universities and which universities are good. So I'm setting this expectation so high for my child, and my conversations at home revolve around factions and pizzas and things like that. So the blend is amazing. So, and I know you must be wondering, what has this got to do with teacher training? But I think this comes from mindset. And it comes from shifting that mindset. And if that mindset is shifted in teachers, teachers will learn on the way. And certainly they will not depend on that half-day workshop. And that half-day workshop is important to give a sense or a semblance of, what needs to be done. But teachers intuitively know. That's why they are. If there's any teacher out there who does not believe in the well-being of her students or ensuring that she creates a balance, she wouldn't really be in that profession. But having said that, I think it's also important, very, very important, Gilda, for universities to change their admission criteria. And if we don't do that, and if they're if they only focus on academic outcomes, that shift is never going to happen in schools. So what do we do for teacher training? That's a completely different ballgame. I think exposure for teachers to concepts around positive psychology and positive psychology in education is tremendous. I know my own exposure for the first time when I accompanied the KHDA team to the US, and you heard the greats in educational psychology speak. You were so blown away because you said, "My God, a totally different world opened up to you," and everything that you knew intuitively. Now, there's a science behind it, which is. And if teachers can have that experience and know and get that exposure, I think that's half the problem.
Yeah. That's great. Well, for me, one of the things which it does come across in UK most of the time when I speak to some schools where they say, well, I'm a teacher, I'm teaching Spanish, or I'm teaching geography, or I'm teaching physics. What is the well-being to do with me? And I think this is where we need to really be careful, because we need to weave that pedagogy into really at the core of everything. Because well-being, and I want to make a point on this, well-being doesn't happen overnight. It's not a spectator sport. You need to work at it all the time. Doesn't matter if you're a teacher or if you're a dinner lady or whatever it is. If you don't look after your own well-being, then you will never be happy. You need to find that balance. And Hind, I'm coming to you now, because obviously KHDA is very supportive of the well-being. And I want to know, from your point of view, from your organization's point of view, what is your opinion about closing that gap between academia and, we know Nargish mentioned about university trying, and there are some university, Harvard University has announced that they're not going to take, in consideration ACTs and SATs for the entry point at this moment. So we don't know the future, but I'm hoping that that's a new way. But at KHDA, how do you see that evolving, and how do you see that balance being reached? And what can you support the schools?
Yes, thank you. I mean, there are a number of mechanisms we are using to support the schools in their journey to let's say, not to discover well-being, but mainly to have it in a focus area. Now, looking at the system, going back to your original question, what should be changed in the system? I think, and it's very relevant to what Nargish said, it's how you define success. What is success to you? Is it a score in an exam? And unfortunately, and currently it is, because that's how your entry exams to universities and so on will be determined. So at a system level, and not just within Dubai or UAE, it's a global thing. We really need to revisit how we define success. Now, when it comes to the focus on well-being, given all of that, this is the existing system that we have. Can we say it's hopeless? It only focuses on exams and scores, or we can say no, yes, that is there, but we can do a lot about it. So one of the things that we've introduced here in Dubai is the well-being census, and the well-being census is actually it's in its 4th year now, and we've started before that with a couple of pilot different things just to see the appetite in the educational landscape in Dubai for something like this. So we've started, and the response is phenomenal, because last year we had more than 100,000 students complete the survey. And mainly it's a nice survey, because we are asking them, are you happy? Are you sad? Did you have breakfast? Did you talk to someone? Did you talk to adults at school? Did you talk to someone? Do you have someone to talk to at home? All of these questions. And just having that survey, it shifts the focus. It allows whoever is going through that to stop and to reflect and to think about their well-being. Of course, we follow that with a complete report that the school has access to, where they can see in a glimpse what's happening. And it's not just, we don't ask just the students, we also ask all the adults in school, everybody, it's not just the teachers, not just the admin, all the support staff are included. Because if I'm talking about well-being, then it's a whole ecosystem. It's the whole school community. So you cannot say I only care about the well-being of this particular group and I ignore the other. So there is, I mean, even if the system maybe currently the success defined, maybe it doesn't take well-being into consideration, there is a lot that we can do to impact the well-being within the school.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's important to mention that I do get a little bit frustrated, because we know there are certain things which we can control and certain things which we can't control, and the system we can't, not at this point. And I think when people say, well, I can't do anything because that's the system, the reality is that there is a way to do it, and you can do it. If you can't do it top down, you can do it bottoms up. And true leaders in schools, they manage to do that. And for me, when you said about the well-being census, I think it's a really good way. And it's not only about the census, but schools should really look at having a tool, an evaluation tool, which they want to measure, well, is the outcome or is the impact, because that gives you a foundation to see where are your students and your teachers at, and what do you need to put in place. And this takes me to the next question about improvement. When we talk about the improvement of students' well-being, often we know that starts with developing a school culture. You know, we know that if you take a program and you put it in a school, you know, as a researcher, I can tell you that works about 10 to 12%. But if you change the school culture, everything changes. But it's a journey, you know, and I think sometimes the school wants something very, very quick and very instantaneous. And I do appreciate that you've got inspections and you need to fulfill those roles, which it is what it is. But the most important thing is, how do you create a consistent way towards well-being? And the question is that, what support do you think as a school leader you need to have in order to prioritize well-being and build that resilience in your school? And that includes teachers and your students. What support do you think you will need to have that to kind of make the transition, or to make it easier for you? Nargish, would you like to?
Yes, I actually would like to start with principal well-being. And you know, sometime in fact, it's been 2 years in a row now that KHDA has been taking principals on a safari, on a safari to Hatta, and it has been such a wonderful experience that, you know, you can't help but course, we were always thinking about staff well-being and student well-being, but you can't just help, think a little deeper that someone's concerned about my well-being. So I really should be, concerned about others as well. So what support do we need as school leaders in order to put these systems and practices in place? I think prioritizing well-being itself is, by the powers that be. Is an important, stepping stone in that direction. Because when the lens shifts on well-being, suddenly everybody's concerned about well-being. And while academics happen on the side, how do we? I remember there was a school that brought in, dogs during exams, and to calm children down and get them to play with the dogs, and that was beautiful. So different schools in Dubai, I think, are doing different things to enable their teachers. As a principal, I feel that check-ins with having a proper systematic check-in with staff, students, support staff, and everybody, and having a systematic or a systemic way of doing it is very, very important. Like we have the well-being census, which is now in its 4th year. So if that annually, the regulator needs to do that. As a principal, I need to have those check-ins on a more regular basis. So, what mechanisms have I put in place? For example, what support do I need to put those mechanisms in place? We haven't really thought that through yet, but if we have a system of, a regular check-in, that will be so powerful, where you can detect something before it even escalates into a certain, it blows up. So well-being ambassadors, I loved your last question, truly, because well-being ambassadors, is something that everybody needs. And I think Safety Ambassadors is another program that, is a government-driven program which is in place. We have Lighthouse Arabia here that does amazing work in equipping even students. I forget the title they give the students. I think first aiders, well-being first aiders, they give it. They train well-being first aiders to actually look out for signs. So I think those are the subtle things that we need to put in place. If I may, just before I hand the mic over, I want to comment on what Hind said 2 questions ago, and that was resonating with me. We often think of well-being and as separate from having challenge in your life, and they aren't different. Because if you look at, this is a common conversation that we have, that if a child is not challenged to the level of his or her competency, you will not get a happy child. You have to challenge that. The child will actually flourish when the competency level, the challenges are equally high. And this dialogue that we often have, that, does well-being mean being happy all the time? Does it mean not being exposed to adversity? I don't think that's the case at all, because the more exposed you are and the more equipped you are, the tools that you have at your disposal to deal with it, resilience increases. And this is the dialogue we often have, that well-being does not mean devoid of, problems or facing issues, but it's equipping children to face with them so that they flourish despite the.
Yeah, I think as well to mention we're not, like I said at the beginning of the conversation, that we're not ignoring deficiencies by any means. And like you said, you have counselors in schools, you're putting a lot of support in schools, but you have to remember that, if we look at a child, in the Victorian times, we kind of send the kids out there to kind of cope by themselves without giving them any tools, because we didn't know. Comes the 4th industrial revolution, we become very standardized. We just say, this is the way you're going to go. This is, just direct everybody. Now is the time we need to take the scaffolds away from the students. We need to allow them to make mistakes. We need to allow them to experience adversity, because only through adversity you ultimately grow stronger. And I know, I might be a little bit biased because my research is about mental toughness in education, is about how you empower a student to be accountable for their own journey, instead to say, well, my teacher is not good, or my mom didn't help me to pack my lunch. All these elements create well-being. And Tracy, I'm coming to you now. And you mentioned, also, I know I keep mentioning about you opening a new school, because I'm absolutely fascinated, because it's really, really difficult. And how do you support the students? How do you support the teachers? But how do you support the parents as well? Because everybody is feeling a little bit the jitters. So obviously, you are prioritizing your well-being. You are looking at different ways of doing things. But do you feel supported? Do you feel you need more?
I think what we've tried to do is look at what's needed in our education system right now. So I've been very lucky that we've been able to change things like the timetable for students. We had a number of parents contact us and say, the way we're working at the moment in normal school hours is just so difficult for us. And so what we've tried to do is to listen to our parents and to try and support them by making the timetable, the time that students are distance learning, easier for everybody. And sometimes you can do that with certain phases in the school. Sometimes you can't. So what we've also tried to do is, for example, we have a strategy where Thursday is our formal check-in time. So we have quite a bit of project-based learning happening with students and teachers. So some teachers are dedicated to that project-based learning. Some teachers are giving their online lessons, but we also have formal check-ins with parents. So we're calling our parents, we're talking to them, we're checking in on students. We know all of our teachers understand that now that we're in a situation where we're really, really prioritizing students that we feel are vulnerable in any way. And that goes for families as well. You know, when you're at home, you've got 3 or 4 children, they're distance learning, you're trying to work at the same time. So I think we've tried to move into a place where we understand the challenges that families are faced with, our students are faced with, and our teachers are faced with. And I agree with you, Gilda, we're not there yet. You know, this is something that we've tried to formalize. I think schools and teachers are very aware of positive education and of having a focus on mental well-being. It's just become more crystallized in the situation that we found ourselves. I completely agree with Nargish and Hind that actually we know now that we need to be mindful of actually providing our students with those tools and strategies to deal with the very situation that we all find ourselves in. Having a conversation with wonderful women as you today is very uplifting, and obviously when students are able to do that, we can also help with that human contact, with organising non-academic support and extracurricular fun activities where students can feel like there is that element of normalcy, that they can chat to their friends in small groups online. They can potentially meet up now in various places. Certainly in Abu Dhabi, where we are, we're trying to encourage art programs and special tours for our students, and just try and ensure that we deal with as much as possible that we can predict in where we find ourselves now.
I think it's important that you come together as a society and to exchange best practices, because I think with well-being, and I don't want to go too on the research side, but well-being, it's a dynamic word. And, what well-being means to me, what well-being means to you is different, although the substance is still there. So I think what I would like to kind of put out there is that there is because it's such a vast word to describe well-being, I think you need to personalize. You need to know what you need for your school. You can exchange best practices, of course, with other schools, but it's not copying necessarily or one model, because we try to step away from that one size fits all. And that goes for well-being. Doesn't necessarily, on a framework, whatever that framework you build and that well-being strategy is fantastic. And Hind, one of the things which I absolutely love about KHDA is that they're always trying to support the schools by bringing speakers, by doing training for the parents. And for me, education is about triad. It's a triad. It's the student, is the parent, is the teacher, but also it is the body who actually controls, in a sense, everything. So from your point of view, do you see an impact on all this support what KHDA does? I mean, could you do more? Is there anything you would like to expand on being able to support the schools in prioritizing well-being?
I think, can we do more? Yes, everybody can. it's a journey, and we are learning with the schools. So again, going back to well-being, for example, and I think Tracy and Nargish, they hit the nail on the head, if that's the term, when they said listen. So listening is a key component into building that well-being, whether it's a strategy, whether it's a policy, whatever it is, and whether it's as a state level or even it's at your institution level. So let's give you an example. For example, for the well-being, we have wonderful colleagues from the schools. We call them the reference group, and usually they represent most of the schools in Dubai. And our reference, every year, usually we meet with our reference group several times, and it's about, we discuss, this is the plan, what do you think, how can we change, what questions do you think we should add to the well-being census, what questions we should remove, and then we listen to their advice when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to what happens, so we run the census and the school has the results. We never prescribe what should be done. I don't think we are the right even body to prescribe what the school should do, because as a school, you have a very unique and individualized, let's say, ecosystem of your own. Yes, there are standards, there are scientific bases you can use and follow, but the needs of your students are different. The needs of your teachers are different. So by listening, the first step of listening is to look at those aggregated results, the reports, and saying, okay, so I have something here. Let's follow it up. How can I even dig deeper and to understand? The next step is to co-create those actions. I mean, if I impose, and I think it was mentioned here, if I impose, it will never work. But if I co-create, then that's a completely different thing. I think one of the things that we've created as a support mechanism is that usually when the reports of the well-being census are out, we bring all the schools to share their practices. I mean, we run workshops and say, this is the report. So what did you do about that? And I think that's a fabulous way where everybody learn from each other and those practices. And this is not the only platform. There are other platforms. For example, Nargish is a founder of one, and we call it the What Works movement, and it's just focusing on what works. Since COVID started, it moved to WWX, What Works X, and that's where whatever the need is there within among the schools, then it will be What Works X will focus on that component. So all of these are platforms. KHDA as a convener can create and support to share the knowledge that already exists in the schools. I think we have a very diverse, let's say, ecosystem here, and that's an amazing strength that anything we do, we should build it based on that.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And I think what, it just seems to be a key message coming out here, that is not only the support which is there, but is that thing which I love, that one size doesn't fit all, and the fact that nobody is kind of put into one direction to say, well, you have to do this, because we know it doesn't work. And, the moment you make people part of the solution, and I love that, because people will give everything. You know that if you ask your teachers to do something because they have to do it, they will be reluctant. When you make them part of the solution, and I have to say, for me, it's been an incredible journey. I've just started a pilot with 10 schools in UEA, and I am absolutely blown away. I mean, that's the word. The way how the teachers have come up with, I am an expert, but they are more of an expert of knowing their students, knowing their teacher, knowing what works. And that's what works, a collaboration and being able to emulate. And this takes me to the next question. We know that well-being, it's also a lot about role modeling. And Nargish, you touched briefly about my last question, which is this one about student empowerment. Now, it's not something which is very flowery and very shiny. I want to look at the depth of a child who learn something in school about themselves. You know, I call it a personal brand identity. Who am I? What is my contribution to the society? And what is my contribution to my own self? But how do you take that child? How do you make that child, or not make, because that's a horrible word to say, but is how do you empower that child to take that message at home? Because sometimes there is a disconnect, and we know there is a disconnect between children and parents. Partly is a generation thing. I've got a 17-year-old child, and I can tell you that there is a generational thing there somewhere. But in the same time, we kind of, as parents, we are a little bit too worried about stating certain things or showing vulnerability. And this is why I wanted to take this, Nargish, this question to you. As a principal, I know what you do in your school. I have a good insight about what you do in your school, but what can we do as researchers, as external factors as well, to help you as a teacher and as a school to take this message from that child, to take that message at home? Because, you know, sometimes I hear from teachers that are saying, you know, everything is undone by the time they get home. You know, their confidence goes down because the certain expectations are in place, or they don't care. How can we take that modeling from the school and what you teach them at home and in the society, in the community we live in? Because we all need to bring together that kind of element of well-being and still learning.
I love that question, only because we do believe that children have Pester power that nobody else has. And it's children who can make all the difference. You know, I remember we had we did so many years of breast cancer awareness, but it really took off when one of our students said, she started the My Mom and Me, and she made 5 other moms sign, and she said, you will get a checkup done. You are signing to get that checkup done. And until that girl didn't institute that, and every single senior girl took that little slip, took it to 5 people, her aunt, her uncles, or everybody, and got them to sign it. So that My Mom and Me campaign, that's why I say Pester power is absolutely awesome. Having said that, I think it's what you're teaching the children. If you just teach them like this, you know, the sage on the stage approach, they're not going to take away anything. But, you know, if it's experiential for them, so that's why, Gilda, your mental toughness pilot that you're running in the school, the kids we absolutely love it. You know, the Inside Out program that you're running with them, about the little gremlins in their head, you know, the anger gremlin and the emotional gremlin and the angry gremlin. They relate to that. So when they have these experiential moments, and they have these intense discussions, you know, that's absolutely fascinating. That is what gets them to believe that. So you spoke of empowering children. You know, I remember I shared our vision statement with you. We deliberated for 3 days whether we should say empower children to be positive change makers or inspire children to be positive change makers, and hands down inspire one. So I think empowerment is a process, and it's temporary, but when you inspire them, you know, that's when they just flourish and they take it to another level. And so I think if the focus is in the school is what are the expectations you're setting, what is the ethos you're cultivating in the school, what are you complimenting children for? You know, children beautifully rise to compliments, authentic compliments. What are you patting them on the back for? And if it's for the right things, they will take that and carry it home. And if you have, for example, our kindergartners, they have a wall which is a kindness quilt. And that kindness has been woven through acts of kindness that the children, so to delineate a child from the family is ridiculous, because you can't say, children, you do this, and not expect the family to be involved. So what are the programs we're putting in place to involve families? I think that's when the child takes the message home and it rings sharp and loud, and parents relate to it and they want to be part of the program. I can tell you so many other examples, but I think it's when you inspire children, when you compliment them for the right reasons, when you set the bar very, very high, when you ask them to exemplify and not just talk big. You know, I know I'm very kind. How do you know that you're kind? Can you give me an example? And they're stuck if they haven't been kind, they don't have examples to share. You know, just this morning we had the finals of the Pearson Scholarship. So we had 16 students applied. We narrowed it down to 2, and we didn't know who to give it to so we said, okay, let's invite them in, because they both were fixated on, one was a computer engine specialist, computer studies. The other one was a mathematician. The girl was a mathematician, the boy. So we got them in because both their concerns were around food security. And we got them in a room and we said, talk to each other. And that's it. We're just going to be passive listeners. They spoke to each other. Do you know what it finally came down to? They said it came down to old age homes and how do we support grandparents. And one of them broke down and cried. And she narrated an incident, in her own family. And we said, it's okay. That's what, through social engineering, you've got to, create these problems. So I take my time.
That is wonderful, and I'm sorry, we'll have to leave it here because we're running out of time. But I think it's a conversation we all want to have on a regular basis, somewhere, somehow, to exchange best practice. And it's been an absolutely pleasure and amazing to get an insight as well. And the great work all you do, and also KHDA. I mean, I've been blown away. I wish I could emulate KHDA into bringing it today as well, to kind of see the force which is empowering everybody and inspiring. And thank you, Nargish, for that. Inspiring. I'm going to take few things from today and I'm going to bring them, because you will learn continuously. And I think this is the most important part. Remember that well-being is a journey. It's not a destination. And reach out to each other and look at the best practices, look at the evidence-based, which is available, because there's so much research out there. And I cannot thank you enough, and I cannot thank you enough just to for inviting us to be able to present something like this. So thank you all for a wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you. Massive. Thank you.
Are we still on?
I'm not sure.
Danny?
Yeah.
Yes, that was an interesting one. I'm just asking Danny if we're still live.
We could talk about this all day.
Oh my goodness me. It's been such a wonderful experience, because you feel so isolated in a sense when you're a researcher, and and I think this is for me bridging that gap between research and practice, because it doesn't matter how much you know, if you don't know how to apply it in practice, and if you don't help use the teachers in the best way, then we struggle. Are we offline now?
Hi guys, I think Danny's just having problems logging back in. Here he is.
Yes, sorry, I had some problems.
Gilda, I'm so sorry I went on at the end. I'm sorry.
No, please don't apologize. It's wonderful to be in an organic situation. It has to develop organically at times.
Thank you so much, ladies. Honestly, that was amazing and very inspiring.
And Hind and Tracy,
I know I'm not a school principal, but I know I'd love to go on one of those KHDA safari trips. So Hind, I'm counting on you to hopefully make that happen.
Nargish, I wanted to go on a safari trip as well. Honestly, I've seen some photos. It's just amazing.
Perfect. If anyone from the audience has any questions or would like to connect with our speakers, please send an email to marketing@guesteducation.com or put it in the chat box on the right-hand side. You'll also be shortly redirected to a short survey once we end the session, so please tell us what you thought, if there are any topics you'd like or suggestions of speakers you'd like to hear from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. A massive thank you to our amazing moderator and panelists, and also you, our audience. Don't miss our next live session that will start shortly at 4:30 p.m. UAE time. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Take care and bye-bye for now. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Masalama.
So you tell me we